Welcome, welcome, welcome. You are listening to Building the Black Educator Pipeline, the place where we talk to real people in the real struggle, doing the real work. I'm your host, Shayna Terrell, educator activist dedicated to the lifelong struggle of freedom and liberation for my people. Today we are joined by Sharif El-Mekki, the CEO of the Center for the Black Educator Development. We'll be discussing the evolution of the center, his quest to rebuild the Black teacher pipeline, and the state of education. Shout out to all my co-conspirators out there listening today. And Sharif, welcome to the show.
Hey, Shayna Terrell. Great to be back. Good to see you. And congratulations on 2022 and looking forward to a great 2023.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that because I want to say Happy New Year. I don't think I've got a chance on the podcast to say Happy New Year to all my co-conspirators. So shout out to you guys. I'm looking forward to another hype, excellent year with all of you. So Sharif, and show is funny because we've known each other for years. And most of my listeners probably know who you are, but I think we have a great deal of listeners who listen to the show. It's like, I don't know, Sharif, who's that? And I hear him get mentioned on the show all the time, but I don't know that guy. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Can you share who you are, a little bit about your work? What should we know about Sharif El-Mekki?
Sure. Look, I'm a '70s baby. Grew up in West Philadelphia. Y'all know the world-renowned jingle in West Philadelphia, born and
Born and
raised.
raised.
Yeah, y'all know the rest. Son to Aisha El-Mekki and Hamid Khalid. Husband to Fatima. Father to 6 children. And I was a teacher and a principal for 26 years. 10 as a teacher, 16 as a principal. My only principal experience were in turnaround schools. So there was 2 turnaround schools. One at Shaw Middle School, where I just learned so much about, really what does it take to turn around a school in a community that had been neglected and abandoned in so many different ways, resources, policies, etc. And then being able to come to Shoemaker, which was my first experience in a charter where I met you, and so many other just really dope educators dedicated to a school that was in the neighborhood I grew up in that West Philly neighborhood, Shoemaker, where I could walk home from school, see families at the shop right up the street, at the post office on 54th Street, at the corner store, the hardware store, and like all these spaces. And Shoemaker was also a school I attended in summer school one year when I was, goofing off in 11th grade chemistry class, and Mr. Kiesel, who I found, by the way. I gotta reach him now, yeah, because I've always said, like, Mr. Kiesel, I gotta reach out to him one day. He sent me to summer school at Shoemaker, but I actually earned summer school at Shoemaker. So, but yeah, and then and now at the center, in between there just had a host of opportunities that different mentors and supporters and coaches opened doors and pulled up chairs and designed and created tables, not just invited me to them, like, hey, help us create this table. So, and then grateful to be here.
Dope. So one of the things that I always love to hear you talk about is your journey to being an educator. What inspired you to become an educator?
Yeah, it's so many layers to that, right? Like it's so many, roads that lead us to where we are, so many paths and tributaries. And I would say, the seeds to becoming an educator were started by my parents, particularly my mother, who was an educator, substitute teacher all the way. She was a teacher, retired, then substituted up until her 70s, right before she passed away. we were literally having conversations like, when are you going to retire, mama? Like, so she was still, and then just an educator in general, not just in the traditional classroom sense, but then also my teachers at Nidhamu Sasa also, I think, planted so many seeds. I think a big part of orientation to become an educator is tied into the experiences you have as a child, and your outlook and relationship with the educational system that you grew up in, as well as the educators who are, leading that classroom in that school and district. And so I would say they planted seeds, although there were no concrete, tangible conversations about becoming an educator. There was always conversations about activism and justice, and whether it was racial, economic, social, environmental. There was always things like, how do you improve the conditions that our people are confronting? How do you participate in the change? But I think it wasn't really until I met Dr. Martin Ryder, who we had the really just honor and privilege of him having the time, him and Mrs. Janet Ryder, his wife, to come up to the Black Male Educator convening, and we gave our inaugural Liberator Award at BMEC, which will be now a yearly occurrence of recognizing some elder that paved the way, lit the way, protected the way to improving educational outcomes, particularly for the Black education space. So meeting him, it was just profound. But again, back to Nathan Musasa, there was a parent of my best friend, Mama Cynthia, who's the one who called me and said, "Hey, they're recruiting Black men to teach. I want you to go to the meeting." And I'm like, "Mama Cynthia, I'm not trying to be no teacher. Like, what are you talking about? I'm on my way to law school. I'm going to fight for justice in these courtrooms." Mama Cynthia was like, but okay, yeah, all that, but go to the meeting. And, she's one of our mamas. So you listen, back when I came up, you listen to the mamas. They give you advice. They tell you, even if you're like, oh my God, I'm a grown man, mind you. I'm not like some 8-year-old. I'm 20 years old, I'm just like, yes, mama, I'll be there. Okay. And I met Dr. Martin Ryder, and she made the best decision by calling me and pushing and challenging me. And I made the best decision to actually listen to my elder, who was pointing me in the right direction. But Dr. Martin Ryder really exposed me to, like, okay, here's what you think you know about teaching. Here's what I'm going to share about all the things that you say you want to aspire to do in the community. Here's how you can actually live that by leading a classroom.
And for folks listening, if you follow Sharif on any social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, he's posted a picture of like that inaugural group with him and Dr. Martin Ryder and the other brothers who were part of that initiative to go out to the community and be teachers. The funny thing about that picture, though, how Sharif says, like, I was a grown man. You could tell he's a young bull. Everybody in a suit.
Everybody else was a grown man.
And this brother had on a T-shirt, okay? He be trying to say it was Gucci, but we don't know what you had on. All right,
listen, but just I was Gucci before these youngins started talking about they Gucci. Yeah, I mean, so you know what I mean. So
but it is a powerful picture. But just to point out, he's talking about I was a grown man. Everybody in the suited and booted. This brother up here in a sweatshirt, honey, like I'm ready to teach these kids. But that's a good thing.
If anything, I'm consistent and try to be genuine. There are pictures out there with me in suits and ties, but it's usually under duress. Usually someone say you have to show up.
The United States government told you to show up in that way.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only time y'all going to see pictures of Sharif in a suit when he was the principal ambassador. Back there. Other than that,
listen, I remember at Shoemaker's first graduation, I'm like bringing a tie, and it happened every year, right? Like, so I'm like, can you tie this tie for me? Like, saying like it just wasn't part of my upbringing. So,
but
one day I'm going to learn how. But yeah,
for what now? For what?
Know. Just to be able to say I know how to do it. You know what I mean? It's the only time I would feel bad is when in schools. Sometimes the youth would come to me, and I always wanted to help them, no matter what. Can I have an apple? Can I have a pencil? Can you Help me with my
Hmm.
homework. Can you talk to my teacher? Can you talk to my parent? Can you, like, whatever it was, any internship, job, direction, whatever it was, I always wanted to be of service. I could never support them when these young boys would come up and say, "Can you help me with my tie?" Sometimes just for a job, I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." Did I do? They were like, "What is that?" I'm like, "I'm just messing with you, man. I don't know how to do this."
That's a
But
mess.
fortunately, we always had, folks, a bunch of black men and women too, who, which always
Yes,
fascinating. I'm like, "Yo, these sisters know how to tie ties too."
I can tie a tie.
That's so amazing to me.
Well, I used to wear my ties with my
Well,
little
you would wear a
outfits.
tie sometimes. Yeah, yeah,
So yes,
weirdo.
I know how to tie a tie. But you're
Yeah.
right. All through this, you remain consistent. Consistent in many ways. So not just in your style of dress, but also in your what? It's
No,
true.
I'm laughing. When I first arrived at Overbrook, I had camouflage on. Like I would wear. And back then in the '80s, they were just like, "Yo, what's the matter with you?" What are the... Now you see all these boys rocking. You know what I mean? I'm just like, "Yo, I'm a trendsetter in some ways with dress." I tell the eight
Oh
black
my
kids,
God.
"Yo, y'all should rock with my trendy gear." You know what I'm saying?
You're not about to call yourself a trendsetter on this show because you
Just
was out here
just with the
dressing from
clothes.
the
You know what I mean?
because you was out here dressing from the wilderness. You're gonna consider yourself a trendsetter. I think not, but if today's show we want to give you that amongst all the things that you are, we're going to also name you a trendsetter out in these streets.
Listen,
Let's do
listen.
it.
Here's another tidbit I give you. When I
Okay.
was teaching, I was probably one of two people that I saw in Philly who were teaching who had straight backs. One of very few black men with... Iverson sees me one day on 54th Street.
This better be true.
Couple weeks later, this boy got cornrow. He started, you know what I mean? Well, maybe it was the next season. I'm like, "Yo, bro, like, you're not gonna give me credit that you saw my straight backs, you know what I mean? Like, his was
So
better than mine, but he had professional hairdresser, you know what I mean? I had, my sister and other folks who's really dope. Like, no disrespect to my sister, she was tight.
so I just want y'all to hear what was just said. I just need everybody to reflect on what this brother just said. That Allen Iverson got his style from him and possibly another brother, teacher, who wore straight backs. I just want everybody to hear this quote from Sharif El-Mekki that Allen Iverson got
Listen,
his style from
it's,
me.
it's it's
So
very plausible. He didn't have it when we ran into each other on 54th Street. That's all I'm saying. Is over there by Larry's, where people go get their fill, with cheesesteaks and stuff.
and he saw
But this
you and was
totally
like,
different time.
that's the style. I'm gonna do
It,
that."
it's plausible. That's all I'm gonna say. It's very,
Well,
very plausible.
what I will say is this fits right along with who you are, the influencer that you are. Okay, I don't know about fashion and hair. I don't, but in education, you are that dude. So that is where I'm going to give you credit for being an influencer. Now, fashion and all that. That again, that's to be debated. That's to be argued. But education, there's no denying who you are, what you have accomplished, and what you continue to do with being consistent and definitely being an influencer. Um, and with that, one of the things that people will look at your history and your career and the things that you've done while you were in the classroom and while you were a principal and be like, wow, like what made you step outside of that and
Yeah.
actually decide that you like want to start a different organization. So I think it would be great for people to hear about what inspired you to actually start the center.
Yeah. You know what? Again, I think there are a couple of, you know, couple of different ways that inform the decision. I think one, there's always like there's a lot of groups of people, but two categories you can look at it is a group of people who are always like, you know what, there's a problem, but they finish talking about the problem in a way that says they need to do something about that. The nebulous they. They don't really identify who sometimes. Sometimes they know who. Sometimes it's just like,
Yes.
yeah, they need to do something about it. Somebody needs to do something about it. Then there are others who look at a problem like, hey, I wonder if there's a team working on this, or if I can join a team working on this, and how can I contribute? And I'm grateful to be part of the latter. Always been interested in how to be part of a community based solutions, effort. I think the other one is the experience with at our schools, but particularly Shoemaker, where you could really see like what a level of activism within a school, conscious, deliberate, connecting activism to teaching and learning within a community school, what that meant. Um, and even even outside before we started formally talking about a Black teacher pipeline, we see that how many of the Shoemaker students were thinking about, because of their experience, because of their voice being listened to, because of their one of the first thing I would hear all the time at Shoemaker was teaching students to advocate for themselves, right? Like I would hear that all the time. Hey, that was part of their, even if it was a disciplinary process, we're going to work with you to show you how to advocate for yourself, right? And one of the most important things that students can advocate for themselves is about their educational experience. Hey, this is how I'm experiencing your classroom, your school, this this district or network. And so one, I think being able to see that over and over and over again, and actually lost track, but we might have 10 to 15 alumni from Shoemaker who are now working in schools as teachers
Mm.
and leaders of varying degrees, right? And several of them in Shoemaker themselves. Some of
Mm-hmm.
them are in other spaces, Baltimore, DC,
Yeah, we got a little crew.
outside of Philadelphia. But then there's, and I think like how many high schools, have that many students who have graduated who are now back in the school teaching. And this is
Mm-hmm.
before we launched the center. They already had to start that journey, right? Like to go through college and matriculate through, and now to be back. And so that's the one I've just I think has spent so much time. So while they were being influenced, I think I was also being influenced by them and seeing their reaction and their experiences. And then, one particular student who I was actually teasing one day because she was going to King of Prussia Mall or something to flip burgers or something. And I'm like, you said you want to be a teacher. Why are you going to flip burgers? She said, because there's nowhere for me to actually learn how to teach. Like, I can't get a job
Mm.
teaching right now. She said something to that effect. Like I have to go work in this suburban mall. There's no teaching job for me to actually learn from and do. And I was like, huh, started thinking about that. Like, that's actually really important.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think all of these, pieces started really coming together. Like, okay, what would it mean? And then obviously having the experiences of having youth who are incoming. We were 7 through 12 building, right? But we would have sixth graders all the way from the spring of their sixth grade year.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, if we were there, we would have sixth graders who are coming to our school on Saturdays as part of, we call it Learning Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And we started just saying like, hey, Learning Institute, why is that always adults teaching these sixth graders? We know in Freedom School, there's also intergenerational. So how do we add that experience, but make it a teacher academy type of experience? And I think it just slowly but surely things started coming together. Just like, this can actually, maybe we shouldn't just do this on Saturdays and weekends. Maybe we can think about doing this as all day or full day or whole, whatever, however we look at it. So I think it's just a lot of different spaces, and then just loving history. I'm not a historian, but I love learning and understanding history. I'm just always fascinated, like, oh, maybe we're at this point because of all the things that happened in the past, and
Mm-hmm.
how to connect the dots, how to, understand the context a little bit better. And so I think it's a whole pot of gumbo of like how
How?
it landed. But each of these have its own strand and history and connection. But at the end of the day, connecting the dots and having the privilege to be able to, you know, um, connect and say, hey, you know what, this is a potential to rebuild a national Black teacher pipeline
For
based
sure.
off of our collective experiences.
Think that's again amazing, right? Because I think a lot of people, when I hear people talk about the center, it's just like, wow, like what you guys are doing are different, and what you're doing is revolution, like, or the work, right? People
Hmm.
continue to quote us with the center saying that we're doing the work. And for the listeners out there, I'm saying us I don't think I ever like revealed this because I go straight into host mode. But I work for the center, y'all. Just so y'all know, I co-launched the center in 2019 with Sharif.
Hmm.
So
And
for folks,
piloted in 2018, right? Before
yes,
we didn't have a name or didn't think, but we knew this idea like, hey, you know what? We have some youth who are thinking about teaching. Suppose they help us teach. Suppose we use Freedom School as some type of model for them to learn how to teach, right? Before we even had a name or anything, it was like the concept and idea like intergenerational, more black teachers, youth activism, and we have youth right here who would be interested, who are graduating high school, who could help with their own legacy and like bringing in the new incoming seventh graders, right?
yes,
Like, yo, y'all have a piece of this. This is your school. Don't you want to inform the incoming students as you're outgoing about what it means to be here and what are the things that you want them to improve upon and know about? Like, isn't that what like education and passing
it's,
the baton is
it's
about? But
all
like,
about.
so I think even that in 2018, I think for me was so powerful because it was literally, a lot of people talk about student voice, student leadership. Like, and we were like, yeah, there's so many people around the world who talk and talk and talk and talk. And then there
Got
are
to be
others
about
like,
that
wait a minute,
action.
yeah,
Yes,
be about the action, student voice, student leadership. You're graduating. What do you want the next generation to be able to know, be able to do, to be able to move faster, more effective, and have even better experience than you had?
can you
What do
had?
you want? And you know what? Don't just tell us about it. Come show us. Showing is usually better than telling.
Yes, and again, I think that's what I appreciate the 2018 experience, and then what we
Hmm.
eventually evolved into.
Yeah.
A lot of times, especially being somebody who like mothers a teenager, and you've
Hmm.
mothered, I think, what, four of them until this point right now. So,
Listen, I've been a
you
parent since
fathered
the
four of them.
'90s.
Yes,
It's crazy. Like
yes,
it's crazy. I'm just like, yo, that's a long time. I mean, it's a lifetime commitment, right? But like, man, I've been a father since the '90s. It's a
yes.
long time.
So you've been up here fathering, yes, for decades. So you understand, or we both understand more on a personal level, how important it is to help young people find their purpose.
Hmm.
I think a lot of times you have young people who are charged up, who want to do things, and the more knowledge.
You better find some purpose and direction because they are charged up most definitely. I know I was.
Hmm. And again, what you even is like, yes, because when you learn more, right, and especially growing up in the environment that you grew up in, son of Panthers, you're seeing all this injustice happening. You're seeing all of these things, right? Like, so you feel compelled to act on it or to do something about it, or you have these emotions and like, well, what am I supposed to do next? Or
Yeah.
again, just living in American society, like, what am I supposed to do next? I'm supposed to go to school, like everybody knows
Hmm.
that, or I'm supposed to have some type of training. Then I'm supposed to go out into the world and like have a job. But if you
Right.
don't help young people find their purpose, that can end up so many ways. What I like about what we do is that we give young people the opportunity to find some purpose.
Hmm.
And some kids try it out. They come, they be teachers. They're like, this was cool, but I don't really like little kids. Great, right? Like we gave you an
Hmm.
opportunity, not only at activism, but also to see if you like a career or a profession.
Yeah.
Um, I really enjoy that about what we do because it's multi-layered. Like, yes, we are rebuilding the Black teacher pipeline. And I think to people that sounds great, like, oh, that's a great tagline. But to understand the complexities of the lives that we are really trying to influence and impact by rebuilding the Black teacher pipeline, I want people to get that because it's from a level of definitely intergenerational, right? So impacting literacy rates of
Hmm.
scholars, influencing and inspiring high school students to get into the profession or find a purpose or passion through activism. We have folks who have came through our program who haven't become teachers,
Hmm.
but they have decided to go into some type of law or justice setting, or say like with what I've learned from y'all, I'm going to go into the health field and I'm going to focus on justice and health. So even that exposure to those kind of things, and then our college students who are well on their way to entering the pipeline, and then what the program and being in this experience does for folks who actually the adults that work for us,
Yeah.
their passion and their purpose in inspiring the next generation of leaders or training their replacements. So the levels and the depth of which I feel like the center hits or rebuilding the Black teacher pipeline hits for me, it's been inspiring to be a part of, and it's been inspiring to really watch it take shape and take hold, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I think that early exposure and clinical experience, and you touch on something. I think for me is germane to the the work is the intergenerational, but like inspiration flows both ways. Even with me like 3 decades into education at this point, I can still see this 10th grader mentoring and teaching a book to a third grader and be inspired by watching that interaction, watching that
Mm-hmm.
relationship develop, watching coaches on our staff that we hire to work and see them working and connecting with a college student and helping them. And then that college student later saying, like, hey, I just got hired to lead a classroom, right? And so seeing all these interactions and relationships develop, centered around educational justice and racial justice, whether it's literacy, whether it's career exploration, whether it's opportunities, whether it's paid opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's research and history and confidence. All these things are baked into the model, but to actually watch it unfold. Um, you know, is you know is really inspiring. I know Sakina, my first grader. When she's talking about like one day I want to be a teacher, that's because of her Freedom School experience. And she's already thinking like I want to lead a classroom. She's looking at the leadership. She's looking at the experience that she had, the relationship she had, what the content that she learned, and she's saying, "Oh, I can envision myself having the impact on others that I'm feeling and that was had on me." She's in first grade. If she's already thinking about it, and having that type of joyous experience, that's to me that's a pretty important factor. And as Dr. Babacar always says, that should be Black kids experience year round, right? Like not
Yes,
just in Freedom School Literacy Academy and Freedom Schools, after school, summertime, out of school time. You shouldn't have to feel whole just in out of school time,
for 6 weeks, for five
Yeah,
weeks.
yeah.
Exactly. I want to stay on the subject for a moment, of like Black youth. And
Mm,
the reason why I want to is because I think many times we're always talking about what's wrong with our youth. We're always talking about the destructive things that they're doing. It's very few times that major platforms are bragging on the accomplishments of Black youth. And even when they do, sometimes it's a very individualized way of thinking. This one
right.
student got accepted into 32
Hmm.
colleges, but it's not really uplifting the collective of Black youth. They're just like anything else, right? The reputation of Black youth is stained by the actions of a few, not the many. But our kids are extraordinarily talented. They have incredible strength. um, so I would love to hear like what inspires you about our youth, and
Hmm.
what do you envision their role is going to be in helping us to rebuild this Black teacher pipeline?
Yeah, listen, they are amazing. You talked about sense of purpose earlier, and I just think that even though I had a fantastic upbringing, I still at some points was a little rudderless, needed direction, and I feel like watching them, hearing that, listening to them, they have such a sense of purpose, where I didn't always have that, even with just amazing people that raised me both in school and at home and in the community. Didn't always have that, and so to hear them with this this clarity of thought. That's what I'll describe it as, clarity of thought. And even if they say like, what, I'm not going to be a teacher, but this is how you know my whatever my work is, how racial justice is going to be a part of it.
Mm.
And so to watch them, and at the end of the day, it's about leadership and love for their community. Despite the circumstances they may have grown up with, around what they may have been exposed to, they haven't lost their love for community. They haven't lost their love for humanity, and they have not lost their leadership. And all that is tied into this curiosity, this wanting desire to learn more, to get better, to improve this, so to be able to be self-reflective and young, curious and learning, leadership and follower, right? Like, like I'm a mentor, but I'm a mentee too. And to
Mm-hmm.
be able to straddle both of those spaces and embrace that, is just really amazing. And I think that is a piece, as you said, like, not only are youth often underestimated, they're often dismissed.
Very
And we can
much.
be dismissive, even if not in our words, in our actions, in our body language, in our responses. And, and we see that on the impact of that, in a negative way, but we also see it emboldens them in other ways. Just like, you know what? Somebody's going to listen to me. I'm going to keep pushing forward. But for me, it's like just really looking at their leadership, and I would say if it was like a difference from like what I wish I had more as a youth is like organized thought, right? Like I
Mm.
could organize people and that kind of thing. You're in sports, you're always like, if you have a leadership role in school, you're going to organize people, but like organizing their thoughts in a very specific and particular way is one of the things that I see them doing, that I'm just always like, man, look at how they think, look at how they're communicate, look at how, like, wow. Then they have tools, right? Like they also use technology to also organize their resource. You organize resources, people, and ideas,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's general. Three. If I had to do three big buckets, and them being able to be 16 or 18 or 20 and thinking at that level, that's pretty amazing, you know.
It
And they
is.
remind me of like Snick and the Panthers, right? Like it seemed like there may have been, let's just say theoretically there was a little bit of a lull, right, between the that those teenagers and the youth of the 60s and
Mm-hmm.
70s, to now. But you see like some level of resurgence of that type, right? Because people forget, they hear about Black Panther, they think they're like grown. Some of them were 16, 17,
Mm-hmm. They were
18,
kids.
SNCC, 16, 17, 18, 19. I see the same, which means it may not necessarily be a resurgence, but maybe I'm paying more attention to it,
Mm-hmm.
and they're likely that they were always there, but there's something about this group and how they're organizing that I and probably many others are paying attention and saying like, hey, this is very similar. And we know history repeats itself
Pizza
in
so.
in different ways.
Yes.
Uh, so that's a piece that I think about a lot when I'm
Yeah.
interacting and watching them.
And I would say you and other folks are probably just paying attention. Because I mean, before this generation, we're like, I was a youth. So
Hmm. Yeah.
we were like my group, right? We were active, we
Mm-hmm.
were charged. I think what falls short at times, and this is when I put it on the adults, when they have passion and purpose, how are we driving them towards that?
Mm-hmm.
I talk to Dr. Carr all the time about this. Like there were things that were like just blatant, right? Back in the 60s and 70s, like a blatant thing that we all had to kind of organize against to fight systematically.
Right. Right.
Because racism and a bunch of other things, white supremacy in many places have become more like covert rather than overt, it's really
Mm-hmm.
hard to pinpoint what are we organizing and fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
So in this recent generation, police brutality and Black Lives Matter has become that thing. So it's given youth like, all right, so we're going to charge and fight towards injustice with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think is why it's become more prominent. I think one of the things that I haven't been able to share on a platform, because we just haven't had the avenue to with the subjects we've been talking about, but I'm most
Mm-hmm.
proud of is our youth from the summertime. Um, when they protested against us. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the reason why I found that so inspiring because we taught them how to protest, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
taught them what real activism looks like. We taught them what it looks like to grab onto something, organize everybody, and as you say, use technology and to stand and be heard. And it was something that may have been simple to us, but meant big to them. And
Yeah.
it wasn't like they were like, we're not going to do our work. We're walking off sites. We're quitting because they didn't want to let scholars down. They didn't want to let kids down. They just said, hey, We're coming together in this public forum today, and we're going to sit in silence for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we're making our stance. So we don't come here to this meeting. We don't contribute. We don't talk. We're sending a statement. Our silence should send a loud statement to you all. It
Mm-hmm.
was beautiful. One of the most beautiful things that I've seen working in youth work. Of how like, yo, we actually taught y'all this, and you're actually going to use this, and you're actually calling on the power of your ancestors and everybody else that you didn't know about before coming here. Like, this is amazing. It's amazing. And that spoke to me so loudly about how powerful, how strong our youth are when we give them something to actually drive towards. Like, again, the substance is there. But what are we doing in this generation as adults to help kind of like guide that passion and guide that substance in the right way? So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to me. So one of the things, right, that I really do admire and like about you, and I'm saying this publicly, okay, because the people already know there's very few compliments that I give to you in the public eye, but but one of the things that I really do, I'm serious about this, that I admire about you is that you are able to see the good in most stuff. There are very few things that you look at from a pessimistic lens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of things you'll be like, yeah, this is whack, but you got to look at this, Shayna. And I'll be like, I guess he's right. Like, you're able to see the good in people, in things, even in systems. So I'm saying that to ask this question about Black children in our current education system. Because most people would say, like, it's shot to hell, right? Like, it's a struggling system. We're failing kids every year. Even with this, with adjustments and training people and all this DEI, like academically, we're still failing kids, Black kids, right? At a disproportionate rate every single year. So if you could dream the impossible dream, what would education for Black children look like in this country?
Yeah, and I wish it, like the impossible dream, but also feel like this is the absolute critical part of the, like the, you know, uh, and it is going to be a battle. But I think, for me, the number one thing is around like what are that they experience uh, other people in the ecosystem, the whole constellation views them in their full humanity, like their aspirations, that they are deserving of our best effort, our best conditions that we can create, our best systems, our best policies, right? But and that is geared towards them as full human beings, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so if they're actually experience, healthy mindsets about Black children by the adults in the spaces adjacent to spaces, that is a radically different experience that they'll have as students, as learners, as contributors, as leaders, within the system. And, to me, I think that is the number one thing that feeds the inequity, right? Whether it's
Mm-hmm.
underfunding, whether it's, policing, whether it's subpar instruction, racist curriculum, racist mindsets, like all of that, like, all of that is summed up into, what are the mindsets of the adults who are creating, crafting, and protecting these systems to the disadvantage of Black youth. And so if there was one magic wand thing that I would love to do, and in the meantime, since we don't have magic, we got elbow grease and discipline and
Yeah.
and fire to fight, right? Like, but like that is for me the most important thing. That is the thing that constricts our students' development the most, because it is so layered, from all angles, right? Like, just imagine you're a Black child, you're going to a school filled with asbestos, vermin, and lead. That's the physical condition. You have curriculum material that says you're less than. Not only are you less than, but your whole people and civilization, nothing was contributed to civilization by your people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you're not even part of this country. You're second class. And at best, you're a stowaway to civilization. You're not a captain. You're not a steerer. You're not a part. You didn't help create the ship. Nothing. The best you your people have ever been are stowaways to civilization's progress,
Mm.
right? And if that's your experience from pre-K to 12 all the way through school in this lead, asbestos, and vermin-filled building, and there are people who are being paid to tell you more of the same, that, yep, this is not only this material, but how I question you, what I think you're worth.
Mm.
All of it speaks to that you are not, your best aspiration is to reach second class and deal with it and enjoy it, right? And all the different ways that message comes across. Like that's what makes me shudder and infuriates me the most. Just that is, and we can call, we have all kind of, fluffy language to call microaggressions and just straight up racism that's drenched and entrenched throughout Black children's experiences in school.
Mm.
For me, that is the same because it infects everything. It infects absolutely everything. Educated prep, policies, procedures, rules, regulations, curricula, physical plant, the whole ecosystem,
Yes.
from school board, you know, to to ed prep. Um,
Mm.
and so when we see research after research shows and things that we know, but when they say a 3-year-old Black child experiences their teacher's racism, like you have racism against a 3-year-old
Yeah.
child, right? Like, and so like what happens when the child becomes 6 or 8? Does that racism just dissipate? They just have now all of a sudden that's gone. That's only in pre-K. No,
Mm-mm.
that's the system. So what would it mean? What would it look like? What would it feel like for that to be wholly different?
Mm.
For our Black children and Black youth. And for me, that's what fires me up. Um,
Mm. With again, your explanation of it should fire anybody up, right? Because
mm.
it's so deep and it's so layered. Um, and it is
And they'll
really
tell you
about.
it's okay. It's like, when we were young, they were like, "Yeah, don't pee on me and tell me it's rain." They're like, "That's literally what it is." Now they call it gaslight. Back in the day, they're like, "Yo, don't piss on my boot and tell me it's raining," right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that they're like, "Oh no, everything's fine." You know what? You just need more. We just need more money in the system, and then everything
Mm-hmm.
will be okay. So you telling me the 39th police district, which is one of the most racist police districts in the country, the only thing they need is a bigger budget? Is that
To
what you're
not
telling me?
to not be racist,
To not be racist. So they're
to
gonna
not kill
stop
Black people.
beating and shooting and cussing and harassing and bullying people as long as they got a larger budget.
Mm.
And so we got to think about that. Yes, our districts, our systems, absolutely the same racism that instructs poorly, funds poorly,
Mm.
absolutely, and that alone ain't gonna fix people's racist mindsets.
At all. But the connection that you make that people like to separate is based on seeing Black children or seeing Black people in this wholeness as deserving of humanity.
Deserving of humanity. Yeah.
But the disconnect between 39th district is funded poorly because whose district is it in? And
Mm-hmm.
those people aren't deserving of the resources that other places are deserving of. So they are going to get the worst cops. Which, the example of putting the most inexperienced teachers in the in the buildings that are strapped the most in terms of academic needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because why? We're gonna give y'all the ones that need to be tested. Y'all not deserving of our top tier veterans, but that's all connected to seeing Black children as whole, seeing them in the right of humanity and what they're deserving to be. So, I mean, the way you layered that up, right? Because I could ask this question and people would talk about the things that you're talking about: money, curriculum. But what's at the root of all of that is these things wouldn't be an issue if you saw Black children in their fullness, and respected their humanity.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it goes back to the experience I had as a child, like in school, and never not feeling loved, even if they had to correct me, discipline me, whatever. Never not feeling loved, never not feeling like they had my best interest. Like never not feeling that they looked at me as them
Mm-hmm.
and me looking at them as me, right? Like having that kind of deep, profound connection and relationship and seeing the humanity in me.
Mm-hmm.
And me seeing that they see my humanity, even, as a young child, first grade, I'm not like, yeah, they see me as a human being. But, as a child, whether you're feeling whole,
Yes.
if you're feeling respected and loved and valued, right? Whether it's like how they're questioning us, the assignments that they're giving us, the challenges that they're providing, the support that they're ensuring we have, all of that, creates a dynamic,
Yes.
within our school, within our psyche. And to this day, we just had our 53rd, uh, Kwanzaa. I think Kwanzaa been around 56 years. I think as a community, this is our 53rd year. And my classmates, my schoolmates, we all, years later, we're talking about like, 50 years later, folks are still talking about the grounding of that experience. And
Mm-hmm.
that shouldn't be unique. That should be a black child's experience. Any
Experience.
child, right? But that should be a black child's experience, is who we're talking about right now.
I agree.
Radically different, and it should not be radical. It should be normal. It should be the norm.
It should be what we experience
When the
as a
norm
people.
becomes radicalized, you know how far away from the North Star we actually are.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
that's
mean,
unfortunately that's where we are as a society. The normal, what should be the normal human experience, the normal childhood experience, is now looked at this revolutionary radical concept.
yes.
That's some BS. You know what I mean?
But you make a good point because people look at our work and what we do and they use that word, right? Revolutionary. And we like, yeah, but it really shouldn't be, right? Like I appreciate the concept, but we just trying to love up on children and then create an environment in which they are deserving of,
Hmm.
which they're supposed to have. And I remember talking about my freedom school experience to people. And I remember talking about the ways in which we treated children, which was in contrast to what eventually came my regular 9 to 5. People would continue to ask me questions like, well, how do you get children to do this? Or and I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's not a how did we? Like, it's the environment that we created and children responded. The environment that we're creating here is you're getting a response that children are going to respond to in an environment that feels like jail or that feels cold. They're going to buck and rebel against that. Children don't buck and rebel in environments where they feel like there's love, coupled with accountability and an understanding that we all have an agreement, a silent agreement in this community on how we're going to treat each other. Like we just know that. But it will always be like, how do you do that?
It's not even a silent agreement. It's
True.
worded. It's said. It's created, right? Like that is part of the collective vision of like what does it mean to be in a healthy, respectful learning environment where we're all learning, and that my success is tied to your success as a
Success.
student. My
Yes.
my my success as a teacher is tied to your success, and your success is tied to my success. How do we work together to make sure that we're both successful?
Yes.
How do we build the community and culture, right?
And we bring up another good point, though, in terms of when you just brought up teachers and their success being tied to student success. But if you could also dream the impossible dream for them, especially Black teachers, what
Mhm.
would the profession look like for them?
Man, that they were again contributors, not just stowaways, not just disciplinarians, not just the help. And I think so often they're looked at as the help. Like, hey, you know what? When I look at how many black men aren't approached about teaching, invited into the profession until after they're grown, they got beards, they got
Mm,
they've reached adult status, and then it's like, yo, you could probably control these kids who are in our schools. Why
mm,
don't you come over and we'll hire you? And it may not be said that way, but I can't help
right.
but to think that that's the
The thought.
mindset and the thought,
Yep.
of like what people are thinking when they're like, hey, let's recruit more black folks. Is it do you recognize their value? Because if you don't recognize their value in America and in history, how are you
All
recognizing
of
their
a
value
sudden,
within a school? Like it
all of
doesn't
a
it doesn't
sudden,
make sense, right?
yes.
There's I think there's consistency and patterns that we have to pay attention to. And
Mm-hmm.
growing up Black in America is very similar to growing up Black in American schools.
Mm.
And for us to think that being Black in American schools are radically different than being Black in America, man, you tripping. Like, nah, it's the same. It's the same,
It
right?
is
And
the
so
same.
I can't help but to think, if Black teachers were actually valued, and it's part of like our, whether it was when Ed Trust and Teach Plus partnered to do that study
Mm-hmm.
of if you listen, we will stay, and what that means and what were Black and brown educators doing. And we did a follow up in partnership with Teach Plus, around to be who we are, very specific, if you listen, we will stay. That was about Black and brown teachers in
Teachers.
general. And
Mm-hmm.
then our partnership with Teach Plus produced, uh, singularly around Black teachers and what they were saying and to be who we are. It had a lot of similarities, but also had some very specific language. Same with the Donors Choose work that we did in partnership, where the report came out. It was very specifically talking about Black men.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read that, and I was just like, wow, some of this is the same thing that I experienced in the early 90s.
Mm.
And
And it's
here,
still
Black men in
happening.
2021 reporting the same thing,
Still
right?
happening.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a shame. I love that you segue into the reports because it also shows, right? We talk a lot about our programs at the Center for Black Educator Development because that's just a big hit of what we're doing and a major piece of what we're doing to rebuild the Black teacher pipeline. We also get into research reports, policies.
Oh, yeah.
You and I both do some individual policy work with Pennsylvania Department of Education. You do a lot of works at times on the federal, state, and local levels as well. What would you say? And this, I don't know if this is going to be like easy, right? But top three policy changes that could happen nationwide that would drastically change the energy around the teacher shortage, teacher diversity, Black male education. You might not even be able to hit all three of those subjects because it might require a different policy for each one of them. But just top three policies that could drastically change the energy around just the state of education that has to do with like teacher shortage, diversity, and like the focus on Black male educators.
Dag, Terrell, that's a great question. Because there's so many, and all this stuff is connected. So, this is going to be, not the best answer, right? This is like broad brush type of answer, because don't want to be technical and wonky. And I would actually need a little bit more time to think about, what the things that because I'm like, all right, what can stand alone and not be connected to five other, because a lot of time with policy, you're like, all right, for this to happen, then this has to happen, this has to happen, right?
Yep.
Like, so just like, all right, what could happen? I would say, one, what does teacher preparation look like? What are the policies that influence and hold accountable what teacher prep is, right? Like, and everything from the actual training and development, who's qualified to train and develop teachers of Black and brown children, right? Because we often talk about who's leading classrooms and schools, but I also want to talk about who's preparing them
these
to
teachers.
teach
Yes.
and lead schools, right? Because to me, that's, again, talking about going to the root. Like, a student is known by their teacher, and a teacher should be known by their students, right?
Yep.
Like, it's a symbiotic relationship. So if I see you and I'm just like, yo, what is your problem? Why are you acting that way towards that third grade Black girl? Why are you posting pictures of her and saying and disparaging her parents and her hairstyle and her name and blah, blah, like, and like all of these things. Funny thing, just like back in the day, we was like, yo, who raised you?
Yes.
Okay, who intellectually raised them?
Yes, who trained you?
Yeah,
I need to know.
and in freedom school, we talk about intellectual genealogy, right? Like, where do you trace your racist mindset to? Where it came from somewhere. And this ain't just dining room tables and their parents' car rides home. Some of this
Nope.
is within their schools and within their ed prep programs. So anyway, ed prep would be one thing. And the policies like how are they accountable? How are they supported? What technical assistance do they get? Where does it make sense? Does
Mm-hmm.
it even make sense? Like as far as how the type of teacher we need today and how a lot of teacher prep programs are created at
Functioning. Yep.
does it make sense for student teaching to happen the second semester of your senior year? And that's when you're going in for 6 weeks, and 4 of those weeks you might not actually be teaching, so you actually like own the
Observing.
classroom half of those 6 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the first week get to know people, get to learn where the bathroom is, blah 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 blah. Then by the final you're teaching one unit, and then like, all right, now go teach
Go
other people's
teach for
kids.
years.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. Like, and so everything around ed prep, what does it mean to actually prepare teachers to be effective leaders? Everything from residencies to certification process
Mm-hmm.
to what's tested, right? Because I know plenty of folks who, if we actually gave a cultural proficiency praxis exam, they'd fail.
Fail for
Like,
sure.
but we don't have
Yes.
that. We're like, oh well, let's see how bad you oppress kids, and then we'll decide. And usually you're going to be in a union, so you're going to be protected, and right, like, and so there's so many layers of like, what does it actually mean to be prepared to be effective?
Mm-hmm.
And National Board Certified Teacher, you had Peggy Brookins on a couple years ago, right? Like she talks about being an accomplished educator. Like, what does it mean
Mm-hmm.
to be an
Be
accomplished
accomplished.
teacher?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you can't separate being accomplished from culture proficiency, right? Because a lot of times you see that folks like, hey, yeah, we're going to do a PD, a professional development. We're going to do a training, or it's going to be a chapter on culture proficiency. But the rest of the time, we're going to talk about content. How are you teaching anything and not be culture proficient? How is that separated? Like, if you don't look at the humanity of a child and you teach it math, how are you teaching math to someone that you don't look at as a full human being, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's illogical, but this is how the system is created. So that's one thing, right? Like, just teacher preparation, the policies that would support that. And it's hard to say one specific policy around that, but policies that support improved teacher prep programming.
Got it.
Um, the other policy I would say is really around finances. What does it cost to become a teacher, and the
Mm.
cost of being a
Being a
teacher, right?
teacher.
Like, it shouldn't
Yep.
be a cost to becoming a teacher, right? You know what I mean? Like, it should be a cost to that. And I don't just mean like financially, where like I have to pay for college, but it's literally like, if I'm so skilled, and these are the people that we want leading classrooms, these are the people that we want molding and shaping the brains of our future. Like, this is the future of our country.
Mm-hmm.
The best resource, most important resource of a future of any nation are the children.
Yep.
It's not your atomic bombs, it's not your military bases, right? Like, it's not your oil reserves. The most important aspect of your future are your children.
Yep.
And so if we don't have that right, and we don't value the people in doing it, so not only is it a cost financially, but it could be a cost in all the other ways. Again, not only the conditions of that black child in that rodent lead asbestos filled building, that's the conditions of that black teacher too.
Yes.
Right?
Who's working in that,
Yeah.
making
So
that
that's a
sacrifice.
cost to me. That's the cost to my health, my emotional stability, the cost, and the finances, right? And so it
Mm.
shouldn't be that kind of negative cost to being a teacher. And so anything we're looking at that, not only the finances, but the conditions, right? Like, I
Yep.
think that the first step of reparations for Black people is quality free education. If I
Education.
want 10 PhDs, because that's what I want to do, like,
For free.
for free, right? Like, that's the first layer. Like, and it's the only layer, but to me, that's the first layer, that the educational experience from pre-K, even before that, all the way through to whenever,
Mm-hmm.
infinity, is rectified. And then the third part, so any policies around it, like, tuition, and again, not just tuition, room, board, book, supply, whatever it is. We're just saying like, hey, this role is so. This is why we started the Future Black Teachers of Excellence Fund, right? Because we're like, what you're choosing to do is so critical to our nation's success that we want to make it
We
a little bit easier for you financially. We
gotta
want to make
find
it a
ways to
little bit
alleviate the
easier for you
barrier.
emotionally, right? To be part of a network, part of a community, to be able to be well prepared, all of those things. And so if we have teacher prep, we have the finance and conditions. Then the third part, it actually starts earlier than becoming a teacher. It goes back to the experience that students have as students, because that is still going to be one of the critical aspects of becoming, and part of that finance is pay too, right? Like people,
Hmm.
teachers should be paid well. Effective teachers should be paid extremely well. But then, what's the experience of you as a student in that pre-K 12? What are all the policies that support a better educational learning experience,
Experience.
human experience in
Hmm.
schools, so that you can envision yourself leading a classroom, so we don't have to, as Dr. Chris Emden used to tell us at Black Men Educators Convening, that recruiting Black boys to teach is like recruiting them back to the scene of a crime
Mm.
committed against themselves, right? And so if we're recruiting people to become teachers, like, yo, that's where I experienced the most trauma, the most racism, and now you want me to come
Go
back?
back to the scene of the
Like
crime.
that's what would be on the flyer. Hey, come and relive your experience, and now just do it as an adult, right? Like
Come on
that's
and be
really
a
what
part of
the
your
flyers look
trauma
like.
and
Yeah,
invoke it on somebody else. Like,
exactly. And come relive it, right? Because then it's like it's three pronged, right? Like not only am I now experiencing racism from HR, the talent team, who barely wanted to let me in anyway, when
mm,
then my principal and colleagues, when they're telling me like racist, tropes and curriculum, I'm like, hey, this needs to be supplanted or at least supplemented. They're like, nah. When I tell HR, like, hey, you know what, that was hella racist. They're like, they didn't mean it. You're just being overly sensitive. Don't be the angry black woman, over and over
mm.
again, right? So I'm experiencing that as an adult, as a professional. If you just from my colleagues, my mama said that she never heard Black children spoken about disparagingly the way that she heard about it in teacher lounges.
Mm-hmm. I
She said
can
she
agree
would
with that.
avoid some of these teacher lounges because she had never heard of Black children being spoken about in that way.
What they
And these are the schools.
represent.
This is where naive, like, oh no, everybody loves children. They love Black children. This is why they're here. This is why they drove over the bridge or from the county to come and teach, because they love they. I'm not racist. How can I be racist? I chose to work in this West Philly school,
Mm.
right? So all that. So you're experiencing that as an adult. It's triggering memories that you had as a child. Like, wait a minute, I was in this. And we know that most teachers teach within 20 miles of where they grew up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, oh, I experienced this across the country. Most teachers experience that within that district or adjacent to that district.
Mm-hmm.
But then now you're charged with trying to protect children that look like you so that they don't have that. So I have it as an adult professional, trigger memories as childhood, and now my job is to try to protect children. And this is
From
all
it.
before I start lesson planning, unit mapping, researching, data analysis, grading, connecting with families, building relationships. This is all before that. This is and you have a supervisor who's absolutely oblivious to any of those other things. Any of those other things.
Mm. Well, again, I
So
hope.
anyway, it's hard for me to come up with like one policy,
But
but
you came up with three very like glaring areas of policy that have to be focused on in order
yeah.
to drastically change the energy around teaching and teacher diversity, Black male educators, and the teacher shortage in this country. You did a
Mm.
really good job with narrowing that down with that surprise question. But I mean, I can go on and on talking to you about education, teachers, the pipeline, our work, everything. But I'm going to get a commitment from you right now while you're on the air that you will be back this year in 2023
Oh,
for part two.
honored to
Um,
be. Honored to be.
Good.
I'm
We
so
don't want
proud
you
of this.
out here.
No, I'm just proud of you and the team. You know what I mean? You know, of like what you all are doing. I think it's so important to um, have platforms. Have this leadership, but to have the community that you all are building. if we think about that 80% of classroom teachers are white, and the majority of students are black and brown, I think the interesting piece that often doesn't get talked about is, yeah, 80% of teachers are white, but guess what that means for what do some teachers become later? They become the professors, they become the historians of teaching, the theorists, educational behavior theorists. They become the principals and school board members and district folks and ed prep right? Like who's writing about this? Who's talking about this from this perspective of the very small percentage of Black educators, right? And so to have a space where you're collecting, and Chris Stewart's talking about the Black educational capital, and holding on to that, and you know uh, reclaiming it, but also reinforming, because of this current context always needs a new iteration, a new level. New technology means new opportunities, and that's how I see you all, going from just like a idea to actual, a real program where we are, this leads to codification, but also this reamassing Black educational capital. Every time I listen, I'm learning new things, and just the people that you all have had and will continue to have that are contributors to the educational ecosystem that are so often ignored, or just people are just wholly unaware, even our own people. And so to be able to center that on this Building a Black Educator Pipeline podcast, I think is definitely critical contribution to reamassing Black educational capital. So just really grateful to you, your team, your partners at Brightbeam, et cetera.
Oh,
And of course,
well,
the listeners, right? Because they are an important part of the community, as well, with sharing and liking and contributing, and if there are opportunities for them to also share what they would love to hear about on your show in regard to building a Black educator pipeline, encourage you to, to you all to mine that, and see what folks are thinking or what's missing.
for sure. Definitely we'll have those avenues up to do that. But we just also want to thank you for the opportunity. Um, Most folks, unless you know Sharif and I personally, you don't know like he's the yin to my yang, but he's also, I would like to say he's the calm to my storm, but he's the storm to my calm. It is actually the opposite. I'll be calm and peaceful, his brother just swirling with some mess, child. But the good thing about that is all the ideas and his visionary mindset and his persistence allows us to create and have opportunities like this. So I want to thank you for the idea of having this, along with Brightbeam, and then giving us the opportunity to really give a great platform to Black educators. So, of course, in all of this, definitely want to thank you. Two more things. One, I want to give you an opportunity to thank Black teachers before we go. But I want to continue, of course, while I have you on the air, my thank you to you for all that you do, for being the influencer that you are, being the visionary that you are, being the next carrier, the next generation of like carrying that torch and fighting and paving the way, but also being the kind of leader that is without a doubt always ready to pass that torch and train his replacements. You've been an excellent mentor and brother to me, and I thank you and I love you and I appreciate the impact that you're having on our culture and our community, and I salute you for that, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, I love you too, and it has been, you know, I- just a beautiful journey of learning, contributing, and learning. All simultaneously. I think, and I'm excited about the future. I think this, when we're challenged as Black people to build institutions, I think, we have to think short and long term. Like, what is it? Yes, this is good work. How do we make it an institution, and not the type of institution that we are accustomed to experiencing in this country? An institution that's bringing good, that's bringing justice, that's bringing real value to our people, and that we embrace accountability for continuing to be able to do the fight for educational and racial justice simultaneously. So, just really grateful for that. And so many teachers to thank. But I'm going to thank someone that I've often thanked, publicly. People like Baba Changa and Mama Fasaha and Mama Renee. These are just stalwarts, and Baba Jahudi at Nadamusasa. But I want to thank Mr. Mosley, and I'm blanking right now on his first name. Mr. Mosley was my 10th grade, 10th or 11th grade English teacher, but he was a guest teacher. He was a substitute teacher. So previously, I had Mr. James, who was one of the most racist teachers I experienced at Overbrook High School. Mr. James was not only notoriously racist, he would penalize you for any pushback, in grades. And, at that time, it was hard. Again, back to not always being organized in my thoughts. I had to rage, but I didn't think about how to address, my rage. Interesting enough, after I graduated, my cousins, some of the Schultz, Hassan Schultz and others, they ended up leading a protest against Mr. James. They ended up walking out of school, having a walkout in protest of this one singular racist teacher, where the district ended up moving him out of Overbrook High School, and acknowledging that, I think eventually he was let go, which is hard to do, because of his racism. I think that, he and I had a conflict because he never wanted to talk about Black literature or Black books or anything like that. Like again, erasure, nah, that's not matter. That's not real literature. That's not real writer. That's not real, that's not worthy of my precious time, type of orientation, mindset, and verbiage. Mr. Mosley ended up, Mr. James was out for a while. He ended up getting sick or something. And Mr. Mosley, Black man, ended up being a substitute teacher. And that was like my first experience of, outside of, in high school, where I felt like, what, this teacher understands, Black contributions to literature, and the connections between what these authors are saying and how to have a literary analysis, and connect it to life, right? Like connecting the dots. And so, Mr. Mosley was, he's another person. I'm like, man, I need to reach out to him, try to track him down. But Mr. Mosley, so shout out to people like Mr. Mosley who step into spaces. They may not know the kids' names. They may be new to the community. They may be, just like underpaid, talking about teachers underpaid, or about substitute teachers, right? Like, but stepping in, but they leading with, you're a human being and you deserve my best.
Yes.
We're going to build community and we're going to build trust quickly, right? Because I may be here for a period, I may be here for the year, but I'm going to build trust with you. But in order to start that, I have to look at you as a full human being, worthy and desired. And there's a connection between us as human beings that you're worthy of my best effort. And I'm going to inspire you to that I'm worthy of your best effort as well. And this is how we build community. So shout out and thank you, Mr. Mosley, dope Black man, teacher, who substituted in our literature classrooms and at Overbrook back in the 80s.
Dope. Shout out to Mr. Mosley. Thank you for standing in the gap, Intolerant and Sharif. We appreciate you
No doubt,
for that.
No doubt.
But we
How about calm to my storm? I need calm to my storm. People are like, oh, you're so calm. I'm like, I'm actually a raging inferno inside. I'm a seething cauldron of conflicts. You know what I mean? So I need some of the calm from my internal storms, as well. So he certainly was that. He certainly was that. And a dope teacher too.
Sharif, we want to thank you for giving us your time today and such a dope conversation.
Yeah,
thank you. So to all our listeners out there, thank you guys as always for listening to the Black Educator Pipeline. It's a show hosted by the Center for Black Educator Development with the help of our partners, Brightbeam. So make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And we will meet you here next time for the next episode. Peace.